Thank you, Your Honor. I think we'll be able to proceed more expeditiously now.
Thank you.
All right. Detective Bonner, you have a box in front of you.
Yes, I do.
And you told the ladies and gentlemen of the jury that you had at one point in time removed the articles from an item that you had marked as a Sheriff's Exhibit 363, correct?
Evidence item number, yes.
Evidence item number.
Yes.
And you reviewed those materials, correct?
Yes, I did.
Now, I misspoke myself. There is a box in front of you, and there's a box at your feet, correct?
There's also a box at my feet.
And have I asked you, prior to coming into court here today, to review the items contained in those two boxes?
Yes, I have.
And do you recognize those items?
I do.
With regard to those particular items, when and where were they the first time you saw them?
The first time I saw them was on 11-26 at the Santa Barbara Sheriff's main station in Goleta.
I may have asked you this, but if I didn't, I want to make sure. Did you photodocument those items that were in the original bag, 363?
Yes, I did.
Now, when you put them back into the bag, were they in the condition they're in now, in the binder, or did you just place them back in the bag?
They were not in the condition that they are now in. They were still together in magazine form, and I just put them back in the same condition as I pulled them out of that bag.
And with regard to the handling of these magazines, were you using gloves?
Yes, I was.
Were you using gloves with regard to the handling of all the magazines that you testified about here this morning?
Yes.
Now, Your Honor, with regard to the two boxes, I'd like to have them marked, and they are marked, pre-marked, with the help of the court, as 530 through 551. Okay.
You're saying the materials in the boxes, not the boxes. You're marking.
Right. Just the materials in the box, Your Honor.
All right.
And then I've shown counsel during the break a series of photographs that have been marked as 689 through 709 for identification purposes. Now, with regard to the photographs that I just handed you, 689 through 709, okay. Did I also ask you to review those photographs before you came into court here this morning?
Yes, you did.
And did I ask you to compare those photographs with the series of exhibits that have been marked as 530 through 551?
That being item 363.
Yes.
Yes.
And your item 363, but are items in evidence that have been marked for identification purposes?
Yes.
Okay. We'll get to the numbers in just a second. And did you, with regard to those photographs, you were asked to compare those with the front pages of each of the items in the box, correct?
Correct.
All right. Now, with regard to the photographs themselves, do they accurately depict what they purport to represent, which is the front covers of each of those books, magazines and items?
Yes, they do.
All right. I move that the items number 689 through 709 be admitted into evidence, Your Honor.
I'm going to object, Your Honor. Chain.
All right. They're admitted.
All right. Detective Bonner, what I'm going to ask you to do now is sort of the same thing we did with the other items, is we're going to put on the Elmo the photographic number that is in evidence and then ask you to identify the specific exhibit number of the binder that corresponds to the front cover of that photograph. Okay.
Okay.
Now, with regard to, if we could put the first one up, which I believe is 689. It's in evidence. If we could go to Input 4, Your Honor, please. Thank you. All right. With regard to the photograph, 689, that's in evidence. Can you find the exhibit number in this case that corresponds with that?
The corresponding exhibit number is 531.
531. Okay. And is that photograph an accurate depiction, or it does depict the front cover of that exhibit 531, correct?
That's correct.
All right. Let's go to the next one, 690 in evidence. With regard to 690, do you have an exhibit number that corresponds to that?
I do. It's 532.
532. And that's the cover of that exhibit 532, correct?
It is.
All right. Let's go to the next one, 691. With regard to 691, what exhibit number does that correspond to?
Corresponds to exhibit number 533.
Okay. Let's go to the next one, photograph 692. What exhibit number does that correspond to?
Corresponds to item no, or exhibit number 534.
So, okay. If we could have 693, please, in evidence. And with regard to the photograph, 693, what exhibit number does that correspond to?
I'm sorry. These are slightly out of order.
I'll tell you what. Let's take that one down and come back to it, by process of elimination, if we can. Let's just skip that one and go to photograph number 694.
That corresponds to exhibit number 536.
Alright. And photograph 695 in evidence.
Corresponds with, there's no exhibit.
Must have come off inside there. Alright. Madam Clerk, perhaps you can give us another 537, and I'll retrieve the other one at the recess and replace it, if you wouldn't mind.
There's a sticker down here.
There is a sticker. Okay.
537.
537. Alright, thank you. Why don't you just put that back on there?
That is not the cover page to this, though. It's a page from within the magazine. The cover page is missing on this magazine.
So that's from within the magazine itself.
Correct.
Okay. But that would be 537.
Correct.
Okay. And 696 is the photograph.
Corresponds to exhibit number 538.
697 in evidence.
Corresponds to exhibit number 539.
698.
Corresponds to exhibit number 540.
699.
Corresponds to exhibit number 541.
700.
Corresponds to exhibit number 542.
701.
Corresponds to exhibit number 543.
702 in evidence.
Corresponds to exhibit number 544.
703.
Corresponds to exhibit number 545.
704.
Corresponds to exhibit number 546.
705.
Corresponds to exhibit number 547.
706.
Corresponds to exhibit number 548.
707.
Corresponds to exhibit number 549.
708.
Corresponds to exhibit number 550.
And lastly, 709.
Corresponds with exhibit number 551.
Alright, thank you. We can have the lights. Did you run across your number 653F in there when you were going through that?
I did not.
Alright, we'll deal with it later. Okay, why don't you take that box and put it on the floor behind you there, because we're done with it for right now. Showing you exhibit 565, which is in evidence. Do you recognize that?
Yes, I do.
Now, with regard to the contents of 565, where was it the first time you saw it?
It was within item 309.
And you've indicated to the jury that you took some items out and separately packaged them, is that correct?
That's correct.
And is that your handwriting on the front of that?
Yes, it is.
And did you place those items into that bag?
I did.
And then seal them?
Yes.
And put them back into evidence?
Yes.
Alright, okay. Your Honor, at the break, we had an opportunity for counsel to go through another set of exhibits. And I'm not sure whether they've gone through the photographs, and I'll hand it to counsel right now while I'm giving the exhibits to the officer. And then I'll identify both of them for the record, Your Honor.
All right.
Why don't you put this on the side, so we can see you? I'm handing you two exhibits. One is 470, a black suitcase. Briefcase, actually. Do you see that?
I do.
And do you recognize that item?
Yes, I do.
And where was that briefcase the first time you saw it?
At the Santa Barbara Sheriff's Department main station.
And do you recall? Will you tell the ladies and gentlemen of the jury what you did in connection with that particular briefcase, 470?
I handled this briefcase in the same manner as the previous items. I checked it out of evidence, opened it up, and inventoried the contents of it, and then sealed it back up and submitted it back into evidence.
And, now, there's a photograph in front of you, which I believe is people's number 86 in evidence. Do you recognize that photograph?
Yes, I do.
What does that photograph depict?
This briefcase and some of the contents within the briefcase.
Alright, with regard to the particular briefcase, I've handed you a big box full of exhibits up there. When you examined the contents of the briefcase, did you put the items that you examined back into the briefcase?
Yes, I did.
I'm sorry, I didn't hear you.
Yes, I did.
And were you using gloves again?
Yes, I was.
Alright, and did I ask you in conjunction with your testimony here today, it's almost afternoon now, to look at the box that I handed you with all of the proposed exhibits in it?
Yes, you did.
And that is your item number 317, correct?
Correct.
Your Honor, for the record, we've had marked for identification purposes items 471 through 529. And in that connection, I've shown counsel a series of photographs that run from, the first one is 295, and then after that there's 632, and then 634 through 680. I'm sorry, 681. Let me just double check that. Yes, 681, I'm sorry. First of all, I'd like you to please examine the photographs that I've handed you. That's 295, 632, and then 634 through 681.
I've finished.
Alright, now, with regard to the photographs that I've just referred you to, do you recognize those photographs?
Yes, I do.
And did you compare those photographs with the items that are contained inside of the box?
Yes, I did.
Okay, now, one moment. Your Honor, if I haven't done it, I want to have just now. The items inside the box I believe I've already indicated would be marked as 471 through 529. Did I do that already? Did I do that already? I just wanted to make sure so we didn't have any problems. Thank you, Madam Clerk. Alright, so I asked you to examine the photographs and to match them up with the items. The exhibit knows 471 through 529, correct?
That's correct.
Now, with regard to the items that are in that box that I've referred to, 471 through 529, generically, just could you tell the ladies and gentlemen of the jury what you observed about those items in terms of what they were when you first saw them on the 26th of November?
They are magazines and loose pages of adult or explicit material.
Alright, so with regard to the photographs that you were handed, some of those simply are photographs of the, if it's a one-page explicit material thing, a photograph of that. Is that correct?
Correct.
And in other cases, they're the cover sheet of the entire magazine.
Correct.
And do those photographs accurately depict what they purport to represent? In other words, do they purport to represent, in the case of if it's one piece of paper, what was photographed?
Yes.
Is that correct?
Yes.
And if it's a magazine, it's the front cover of that magazine. Is that correct?
Yes.
Your Honor, I would move Exhibit 295, 632, and 634 through 681 be admitted into evidence.
Objection. Foundation and chain.
The chain objection is overruled. That goes to the weight. I'm not clear on your foundation objection.
The proof of actual seizure. Who seized it, who they gave it to.
They can't hear you in the back. But I heard you.
It's a chain type of foundational objection. Basically the proof of who seized it, where they seized it, who they handed it to. There's evidence that there's no record of any of that.
All right, counsel, the issue.
We established that already.
I'm going to overrule the objection. The chain, as I've stated, goes to weight. Go ahead.
Thank you, Your Honor. And we'll need the Elmo again, Your Honor. Just to clarify, officer, before we start this process, the items that you're about to testify to with regard to the photographs and the exhibits that came out of that briefcase, 470, correct? Excuse me, the briefcase that's in front of you in the photograph 86.
Yes. I know it is item 317.
Alright, let's put up 295. And can you find the exhibit number to which that corresponds?
That corresponds to exhibit number 471.
Now, you have a binder in front of you that has a number of different materials, correct?
That's correct.
And with regard to the materials in that particular binder, are these the loose materials that were found inside the suitcase?
Yes, they are.
Okay, let's continue, then. If we can put up 632 that is in evidence, do you recognize that?
Corresponds to exhibit number 472.
Okay. And with regard to 634?
That corresponds to exhibit number 473.
Okay. 635.
That correspond to exhibit number 474.
636.
That corresponds to exhibit number 475.
An exhibit in evidence 630, what's the next number you have there, the photograph number? 637. That would be the binder.
That corresponds to exhibit number 510.
That is a whole magazine, correct?
That's a whole magazine.
It was when you first saw it.
Yes.
And it's now in a binder.
Yes.
638.
That corresponds to exhibit number 476.
640. I'm sorry, I skipped one. 639. I think that's a magazine.
It's a loose page, exhibit number 511.
Okay. 640.
It's going to correspond with exhibit number 477.
Okay. Let's go to 641, which I believe is a magazine.
Corresponds to exhibit number 512.
And 642. Did you lose a tag again?
We lost a tag again. It appears I have a 513.
That's correct. 643.
I have exhibit number 514.
644.
Corresponds to exhibit number 515.
645.
Corresponds to exhibit number 516.
646.
Corresponds to exhibit number 517.
647.
Corresponds to exhibit number 518.
648. I have a note that it's a notebook.
Upside down.
Oh, okay.
Okay. That corresponds with item, I'm sorry, exhibit number 519. And that is not the cover page, but it is the second page within it, which identifies what it is.
Alright. 649.
Corresponds with exhibit number 520.
650.
Corresponds with exhibit number 521.
3. I'm sorry. 651.
Corresponds with exhibit number 522.
652.
Corresponds with exhibit number 523.
653.
Corresponds with exhibit number 524, and it's a loose page.
Okay. 654. And why that might help you. 317 why.
Okay. That's item no, or, I'm sorry, exhibit number 479, and that's a centerfold. It's one of the pages of it.
Okay. 655.
Corresponds to exhibit number 480, and that's also one page within a centerfold.
656.
Corresponds to exhibit number 481, and that's also a centerfold.
657. You might want to look at 317b. I think there's
exhibit number 525.
Now, is there a never mind? 658.
Corresponds to exhibit number 483. It's also a centerfold.
659.
Corresponds to exhibit number 485. It's a centerfold.
660.
Corresponds to exhibit number 487. It's a loose page.
488. I'm sorry, 661.
Corresponds to exhibit number 488. It's a centerfold.
662.
Corresponds to exhibit number 489. It's a loose page.
663.
Corresponds to exhibit number 490, is the cover off of the magazine.
664.
Exhibit number 491. It's a loose page.
Alright. 665.
I'm sorry. Exhibit number 492. It's a loose page.
And 666.
Exhibit number 494. Loose page.
And 667.
Exhibit number 495. It's the cover off the magazine.
668.
Exhibit number 496. It's a centerfold.
669.
Exhibit number 497. Loose page.
670.
Exhibit number 498. Loose page.
671.
Exhibit number 499. Loose page.
672.
That's exhibit number 500. Centerfold layout.
673.
Exhibit number 501. Centerfold.
Exhibit number 674.
It's exhibit number 502. Centerfold.
675.
It's exhibit number 503. Again, centerfold.
677, I'm sorry, 676.
Exhibit number 504. It was a pamphlet.
677.
Exhibit number 505. Centerfold.
678.
Exhibit number 506. Cover page of a magazine.
679.
Exhibit number 507. Loose page.
And 680.
Exhibit number 508. Centerfold.
Lastly, 681.
Exhibit number 528.
Alright, I think we can turn the lights back on. Alright, I want to ask you some questions with regard to the briefcase, Exhibit 470. Now, you told the ladies and gentlemen of the jury I believe on November 26, 2003, you opened the briefcase and photo-documented the materials inside, correct?
That's correct.
And inventoried them.
Correct.
Now, when was the next time that you became involved in dealing with the materials that were contained inside of the black briefcase marked as 470?
On July 20, 2004.
And would you tell the ladies and gentlemen of the jury exactly what it was that you did on July 20?
On July 20, I went to the Santa Barbara Superior Court, met with the clerk who was in charge of controlling the evidence that was booked in the grand jury. And I, while wearing gloves, opened up this item and photo-documented exactly what was within there. That included not just the cover pages, but every single page and every single piece of paper that was inside that item that was booked into grand jury evidence. And I then closed it back up, gave it back to the clerk who was maintaining custody of this item, and I prepared a CDR disk that contained those digital images that I took of the contents.
Now, did you at some time go back? Did you at some time again become involved in the handling of the Exhibit 470?
Yes, I did.
When was the next time that you were involved in that?
On October 1, 2004.
And the purpose for that? What did you do and where did you go?
A court order was signed that allowed me to check this item out of evidence and bring it back to the sheriff's department to have it forensically examined and processed.
Now, did you do that?
Yes, I did.
And did you work with any other individual in that process?
Initially, after checking it out, I brought it to Detective Lafferty. I later went back and I met with Detective Spinner, and we went through and did a much more detailed inventory of those items to ensure that each one had a sub-item number.
Now, Detective Spinner, do you know, he works for the Santa Barbara Sheriff's Department.
Actually, he is retired, so.
He was brought back for this case.
Correct.
To do some fingerprint evaluation.
Correct.
Okay. Now, in the process of doing what you call documentation of the alpha numbers given to these, did Detective Spinner already have some of the magazines at the time that you went through this process?
That's correct. Some of the items had already been processed and were split up and in binders, such as you see here today. Some of the other items were not in binders. They were still in complete magazine form.
And the process that you did with Detective Spinner was simply to make sure that all of those items were accounted for, is that correct?
Correct. And to give each one a sub-item number, and document that on something that was written. And
you did that?
Yes.
And that's why we see on the display here that they have an A, B, C, and in some cases double A or GG, or whatever.
Correct.
That was the process you documented with Detective Spinner.
Correct.
Now, at the time that you went to the Santa Barbara Superior Court on July 20, 2004 and photo-documented the contents of the Exhibit 740, to your knowledge, had some items already been removed and sent to forensic examination?
Prior to grand jury?
Yes.
Yes.
And that's documented in reports, correct?
I believe so. Not mine.
Right. Mr. Mesereau. Off-the-record discussion held at counsel table. Madam Clerk, I'm going to need 2 exhibit numbers. Next in order would be fine.
It would. Have you used the numbers through 740 yet?
Excuse me, Your Honor. May the record reflect that I opened these packages at Mr. Sneddon's direction.
Actually, that one was open, but the small one was closed, correct?
It would be number 122980, and that's also number 332.
All right.
Thank you.
For the record, Your Honor, the items that Mr. Mesereau just examined, I'm going to have the first one marked. It's a small brown bag, which is the number 332, which is the one he did open, and that's Exhibit 720 for identification purposes. And then the next one's a larger brown bag with item no number 305 at the top, and that's marked as 721, and that one was already opened.
All right.
Thank you. Please take a look at 720. Do you recognize that?
Yes, I do.
And where was that the first time that you saw it?
I found this item within a briefcase which was in the upstairs area of Michael Jackson's bedroom at Neverland Ranch.
And did you then take it into your custody and control?
I did.
And what did you do with it?
I provided it to Detective Padilla, told him where I found it, what it was. And he then processed it, giving it an item number, sealing it.
And is the exhibit in the same condition that it was when you seized it on that particular day?
Yes, it is.
All right. Move that it be admitted into evidence, Your Honor.
All right. It's admitted.
And the next item is 721. Do you recognize that item?
Yes, I do.
All right. And where was that item the first item that you saw it?
This item was sitting on a piece of furniture within one of the bathrooms in Michael Jackson's bedroom area.
And it's a photograph, correct?
It is.
And do you recognize the person in the photograph?
Yes, I do. It's Macaulay Culkin.
And with regard to that particular exhibit, go ahead and take it out of the bag for just a second. Just look at it for yourself, if you would. Now, with regard to that particular exhibit, 721, is that correct?
That's correct.
721, it looks like, on the photograph that you withdrew from the brown bag, it has some writing on it, correct?
It does.
Was that writing, was it in that condition when you first saw it?
Yes.
Did it have that writing on it?
Yes, it did.
And then after you took that particular item, what did you do with it?
I again took it down to Detective Padilla, provided it to him, told him where I found it, what it was. He then processed it by putting it into a sealed evidence bag, and noting it on his report.
And is it in the same condition as when you seized the item on November the 11th?
For the most part.
What's different about it?
There's a couple of corner pieces that have fallen off into the bag.
But they're in the bag, correct?
Yes.
So everything in substance is there that was there when you seized it?
Yes.
All right. Move that be admitted into evidence, Your Honor.
No objection.
It's admitted.
Your Honor, I think I'm finished. No further questions. Thank you.
Cross-examine.
Yes, please, Your Honor. You have answered questions about a large number of what appear to be.
Tom, excuse me. Your Honor, there is one other thing I forgot to do. I've just been reminded. If you don't mind, counsel.
No, not at all.
Thank you. Appreciate it, Tom. Your Honor, I have a photograph that's been marked as 151 for identification purposes. May I show it to the witness?
Yes.
Do you recognize the items depicted in the photograph, number 151?
Yes, I do.
Where and when were those items the first time you saw them?
These items were situated on the ground within one of the closets in Michael Jackson's bedroom area.
Does that photograph accurately depict the condition of those items at the time that you seized them?
With the exception that I have picked them up, yes.
And you've picked them up?
Yes.
All right. Move that 151 be admitted into evidence, Your Honor.
No objection.
It's admitted.
All right. Would you just show to the ladies and gentlemen of the jury the photograph that's in evidence? Now, where were those? Where were those found specifically in Mr. Jackson's bedroom?
Within his bedroom, there were two bathroom areas. One, as you enter, was on the right. The other was on the left. Both bathroom areas had a closet that went off of it. This one was on the left side. It was a locked closet area. As you entered the closet, it made an L shape going to the left. It was within that L shaped, the bottom of the L on the ground on the left side.
Counsel, can't you put that up on the screen so the people out there can see?
Okay. I think I kind of interrupted you. Could you tell me where exactly it was? What closet it was that you found it in? What bathroom?
Okay. Again, there were two bathrooms. One that was on the right as you entered, one that was on the left. This one was on the left side. As you entered the bathroom, there was a closet that went off to the right. This was a locked closet that we had opened. This closet was actually in an L shape. As I went into the bottom of the L, continued down, and it was on the left side on the ground.
And then did you actually take the items depicted in the photograph, 152, in evidence, and book them into evidence?
I took them down to Detective Padilla. Again told him where I found it, what they were, and he then booked them.
All right. Thank you, counsel. And thank you, court. No further questions.
Regarding the items that you were just shown in the last exhibit, there's a bottle of Jack Daniels and a bottle of what appears to be red wine, correct?
Correct.
Do you know if those bottles were ever fingerprinted?
I do not know.
Did you have any responsibility for determining if they should be chemically tested for anything?
Not responsibility, but involvement.
And what was your involvement?
We spoke about it amongst all of us that were part of the team at that point in time. And I know that they were sent off for DNA swabbing, or that they were swabbed, and that was sent off to be compared. I do not know whether or not they were fingerprinted.
But they were DNA swabbed, as far as you know.
Yes.
Did you ever get any results?
I believe there were no results.
Okay, no results, meaning what?
That we did not get any comparable DNA matter off of them.
Were you responsible for recommending DNA testing of any of these materials that you've talked about today?
Again, responsible probably isn't the word. Involved is probably the more correct word to use.
Do you know if any of the materials that you've identified today were DNA tested?
I know that items within 317 were sent off to the Department of Justice laboratory to ascertain if there were materials on the items which could be tested for DNA.
And just for the record, item 317 is what?
I'm sorry. It's the briefcase that had these materials in it.
Okay, and to your knowledge, there was no DNA found, correct?
That is correct.
And you're talking about DNA testing of the briefcase, correct?
Of the materials within the briefcase.
Yes. Are you talking about the briefcase itself, too?
No.
Okay. And what you're saying is no DNA of Gavin Arvizo, or Star Arvizo, or any Arvizo, were found, correct?
No DNA at all, including theirs.
Okay. Now, you say you were involved in decisions regarding DNA testing, right?
Correct.
What does involved mean?
We had meetings where we discussed what was going on, who was going to do what, and this type of, it included dispositions of evidence, who was going to go do interviews with whom. And we spoke about what we wanted to do and in what order that we wanted to do it.
And who was at these meetings typically?
Typically would include, at minimum, Lieutenant Klapakis, Sergeant Robel, Detective Zelis, Detective Alvarez, and myself, and many times also included members of the prosecution.
Now, you've identified a lot of what appear to be commercially produced adult material, right?
Correct.
And all of it appears to be commercially produced, for the most part, doesn't it?
For the most part, yes.
And all of it appears to be the type of material you can lawfully purchase, correct?
Depends.
Well, you can go to most magazine stands that sell this kind of material and find thousands of magazines that you can buy like that, correct?
Yes.
Okay, and it goes without saying, Mr. Jackson is not being charged with possessing or anything related to this kind, illegal adult material, is he?
We have not charged as such, no.
Okay, have you actually checked to see if you can find these magazines available in a commercial market type of situation?
No, I have not.
Have you gone to newsstands to see if you can find this material available at newsstands?
No.
Have you ever made any effort to find out where you can actually go buy this stuff?
No.
Okay, and you don't know where a lot of this material originated, correct?
I do not.
You don't know if it was mailed to Mr. Jackson or purchased on his behalf, correct?
For the most part, no.
Okay, with respect to DNA testing, was the DNA testing that you're aware of limited to materials in the briefcase?
As far as I'm aware of, yes.
Okay, and as far as the other exhibits you've talked about today, which appear to be, for the most part, adult material, you're not aware of any DNA testing on those exhibits, correct?
I am not.
If any were done, would you most likely know about it?
Probably, yes.
And that would be because of your involvement that you've just described.
Yes.
Okay, now, were you involved in actually searching and seizing some of this material?
Yes, I was.
Okay, was that your primary role during the day of the search?
Initially it was not.
What initially was your role?
Initially myself and Detective Alvarez were assigned to go conduct an interview with a witness.
Okay, and then following that, you went to Mr. Jackson's main residence, correct?
Neverland, correct.
And you started conducting a search, right?
Initially, again, I was assigned to assist in interviews.
Okay, now, let me ask some questions about exhibits 471 to 529. Okay, and they're the items that you say were found inside of 470, which is the black briefcase, right?
Item 3. I'm sorry, I normally know things by our item numbers.
The black briefcase is item 470, right?
Yes.
And exhibits 471 to 529 were found inside of that briefcase, right? Do you know?
I cannot. If you show me the item, I mean, obviously we're dealing with a lot of numbers here. If you tell me, like, our evidence item, I can tell you whether or not it came from that.
Let me approach it from a different way. I think you said at one point, in response to the prosecutor's questions, that you had checked out items out of 470, which is the black briefcase, correct?
Correct.
And I believe you said those items were 471 to 529.
I have identified them as such by cross-referencing them, looking at the materials, looking at the actual physical items and also checking it against our evidence item number, which is how we track items, as opposed to the court tracking of items.
Am I correct that you testified you checked out items 471 to 529?
Yes.
Okay, so you know what they are, right?
Yes.
And presumably before you testified today, you went over some of this with the prosecutor for the government, right?
Correct.
Okay, and when did you do that?
I did that on Tuesday.
Okay, did you have any items of evidence with you at that point?
No, I did not.
Okay, how did you discuss what numbers you were going to testify about? Maybe that's not a good question. You clearly discussed what numbers you were going to testify about, true?
Correct, yes.
And did you use anything to facilitate your ability to prepare for your testimony today?
Yes, I did.
What did you use?
District Attorney Sneddon provided me, one, with the pictures that he has introduced.
Okay.
They also were in possession of the actual physical evidence items, okay. I also compared that with my reports that I authored and with pictures that we have taken.
Okay, now, you took them out originally. Was it at the sheriff's department?
The first time.
Yes.
Yes.
And what did you do with them?
I pulled them, I opened up, for instance, on this particular one, the briefcase, broke the seals, I opened it up. I then inspected the contents of it. As I was doing that, I was dictating a report of the contents of it, and taking photographs of the contents. Once that was completed, I then put the materials back where they were originally, closed it, sealed it, and then booked it back into evidence.
And were you alone when you did that?
Yes.
At some point, did you separate some of these materials yourself?
For item 317.
Any item?
Item 309, yes.
What you did was you took the item apart, right?
I took two of the items which were contained within the original evidence, item 309, which was the briefcase, that being the two adult material DVDs, and I put them into the separate bag.
Okay. Did you ever separate any of the photographs that are contained in the exhibits you referred to today?
No.
Okay. Did you ever pull any pages or photos out from any attached type of magazine?
No.
Okay. Do you know if anybody ever did?
Yes.
Okay. Somebody did.
Yes.
Who did that?
Forensics personnel.
So they took magazines and actually separated pages out, correct?
Correct.
Okay. And do you know when that was done?
I do not.
Okay. How do you know it was done?
I have read reports. And again, during our meetings where we discussed what's going on with the case, again I've heard conversation to that effect.
And were the items then returned to you?
No, they would have been returned to the evidence locker, to our property office.
So they would have been returned to the evidence locker, separated out from what they originally were like, right?
Correct.
And basically what you're saying is people at forensics, when asked to test a particular item, would take that item apart, right?
Correct.
And your understanding was they would take that item apart, because that would facilitate forensic analysis of some kind, right?
Yes.
Okay. And you were part of the group that decided which items to forensically test in that manner, correct?
Discussed. Decisions are done at a higher level than a detective.
Who made the decisions to forensically test some items and not forensically test others?
At minimum, probably with Lieutenant Klapakis, and it probably also involved members of the prosecution.
Okay. And that would be Prosecutor Sneddon, Zonin, Auchincloss.
Yes.
Okay. Alright. Now, there must have been meetings where you had discussed whether or not to forensically test certain items, correct?
Correct.
And you would presumably look at an item and decide, do we want to test this or not, right?
Sometimes look at them, sometimes they weren't checked out. For the most part we check them out one time, and allow them to look at them, just like we allowed you guys to look at them. And based upon that, we categorized them and began to make a priority list of which items should be done first.
Now, am I correct that no forensic testing of any of the items you've identified today was done till after the grand jury met?
I do not believe that's correct.
Okay. What items that you identified today were forensically tested before the grand jury convened?
I believe certain items within 317 were forensically tested and subsequently sent out to the California Department of Justice for further testing.
Okay. And were you involved in that process?
No, I wasn't.
Okay. Well, to this date, you've never found Gavin, or Star, or any Arvizo's DNA on anything, right?
We have not.
So the first time you checked out items 471 to 529 was to photograph them, as you just described, right?
Correct.
And then you repackaged them and put them back in the condition you found them and rebooked them into evidence, right?
Correct.
Okay. Were you responsible for conducting any fingerprint analysis of any of the items contained in 470, the briefcase?
None whatsoever.
Okay. Do you often do that in your type of work?
Never have.
Okay. Are you familiar with what is called ALS, an alternate light source type of test for fluids?
Yes, I am.
Do you know if that was ever done on any of the items you've identified today?
I believe it has.
And which items would they be?
I believe it was done with certain items within item 317.
Were you part of the group that decided to make that type of test or, to do that type of test?
I was part of the group that discussed it. Again, the decision would have been made, but, yes, I was aware of it.
Now, if a decision was made to do forensic testing, would you be the one to essentially refer it to forensic people in this case?
Not in this case, no.
You've done it in other cases, though, right?
Yes.
Typically, once a decision was made, who would be the one to actually be responsible for referring an item of evidence for forensic analysis?
Typically.
Yes.
Under any other or most other instances, it would be the lead investigating officer.
Okay, and in this case, who were you referring to?
Well, in this case Detective, or Sergeant Robel was the lead investigating officer.
Okay, so as far as you know, was he the one that had the responsibility, once a decision was made, to refer an item of evidence for forensic examination?
In this particular case, I believe it would have been actually Lieutenant Klapakis.
Okay, Let's get back to the first time you removed items from the black briefcase, which is number 470. You put them back, and do you know what? You rebooked them into evidence. And to your knowledge, what happened after that to that black briefcase?
Other than the times that I personally came into contact with it, I have not had any contact. I don't know for certain. However, I do know that we have checked items out for you guys to look at, as well as for the prosecuting attorneys to look at, and then it has gone out to grand jury, and then also to forensics personnel.
Okay, when did you next handle the black briefcase, number 470, and its contents?
That would have been on July 20th.
And again, the purpose for that was?
There was a court order that basically stated, prior to us being able to remove these items, I had to go and photographically document the contents of the item, and turn those photographs over to you guys, and eventually to provide a copy to the court as a replacement for what we were taking.
Okay, and did you repackage these items again?
I put them back into the briefcase.
And how did you do that?
Put them back in where I found them as I opened it.
And you had gloves on your hand, correct?
Yes, I did.
Did you have gloves on your hands at all times when you handled 470?
Yes.
Would that include at the main residence as well during the day of the search?
I didn't handle item 470 at the main residence.
Never touched it that day?
No.
Now, to your knowledge, an alternative light source type of test can be done in approximately a day, correct?
I don't know how long it takes.
Okay, and to your knowledge, it's not a destructive type of test, meaning it doesn't actually
No.
harm or destroy an item of evidence, right?
No.
Okay, and I think what you're saying is at some point people at forensics must have repackaged the material and sent it back to rebook it into evidence, right?
Correct.
Okay, were you part of that process at all?
No.
Okay, is it true, based upon what you know, that no fingerprint analysis of item 470, the black briefcase and its contents, was done till approximately 1 year after the search at Neverland?
That sounds about correct.
Okay, were you involved in the decision to wait that long?
No.
To test it. In fact, those items in 470, the black briefcase and the contents, were not tested for fingerprints till approximately November of 2004, right?
I know it happened after I checked it out.
Okay. Now, you appear to have focused on item 470 more than you did a lot of the adult magazines you discussed today, correct?
What do you mean by?
Well, you seem to have been handling and repackaging 470.
Correct.
In a way that you were not with a lot of the adult material that you referred to today, correct?
Correct.
But, are you saying that the question whether or not to forensically test that material all came up for discussion with the group of people you mentioned?
Yes.
Okay, and typically would the group sit around and look at something and decide where it was found and make a decision whether or not to test it?
We wouldn't look at it. Again, we would discuss it. These items were, at the time, in evidence lockup still, and basically we went through what was found within it, and how it correlated to the case that we were investigating and prioritized from that.
Okay. With regard to the items you've discussed today other than 470, do you recall, after they were initially booked into evidence, you're retrieving them for any purpose?
Again, the first time was when I pulled it out to inventory the contents. I have also pulled it out for you guys to look at, as well as for members of the prosecution to look at, and that's what and then also to bring them to court.
Okay.
Counsel.
Yes, Your Honor.
I want to handle the break a little differently.
Sure.
I'd like to have the jury taken out now. We'll start your break a couple minutes early. That's a reward. Laughter. And then we'll start our break just in a couple of minutes for the people in the courtroom. I just want to address an issue. You can step down, officer. We're on our break.
Thank you.
All right, I was just going to make a ruling. I told you this morning that I had a tentative ruling, which I gave you, and I wanted to look at the materials a little further that were submitted to the court before I made my ruling. The court will grant the defense motion not to allow that evidence in. The primary reason is, it does appear to be cached material. There wouldn't be any way of knowing whether anyone looked at it or not. It doesn't seem to be material, as it doesn't relate to the area. The time area that I'm talking about. So that will be the court's ruling. We're in recess.
Your Honor.
We did not have those exhibits marked.
Oh, I need those exhibits marked that you referred to in your opening.
Okay. Yes. That's fine.
These